Where's all the crosses?
Early water. Jury's out on that.
I've never been in a TV pitch meeting, but sometimes it's easy to see how they went down. Like, it's kind of like Friends, but in the 70s. Or it's kind of like Friends, but just Joey. Or it's exactly like Friends, we aren't going to change anything or do anything to hide it. But some are more abstract, and it's hard to see exactly how those shows got the green light. Like, it's about archaeologists, but it's exciting somehow, but also not really, because it's set entirely in Bath. Or it's about zoologists fighting dinosaurs and stuff that come through portals, and I've generally been thrown out of the room by now, you guys must be pretty desperate. Or it's like Doctor Who, but really, really horny.
That sounds awful.
Actually, it was a lot of fun, you should totally check out Torchwood.
Excuse me, have you seen a blowfish driving a sports car?
The pitch meeting for 1998's Ultraviolet probably falls into the former camp, with a setup that sounds like an unholy cocktail of things that were cool in the 90s. What if we mixed Men in Black with the X-Files, but they were fighting vampires?
Well, sounds like a lot of crazy fun for sure.
But the campy-sounding setup doesn't do justice to how interesting this short-lived TV series actually was. When police detective Michael Caulfield's partner goes missing while investigating a mysterious case of counterfeiting, and a murder that seems to have been committed by no one, he is drawn into the orbit of a clandestine organization who seem to be above but outside of law enforcement, and exist to fight a mysterious enemy that operates in the shadows. I've already spoiled that this mystery enemy is vampires, but in one of the show's weird quirks, that word is never used, with the formal title being Code 5, the Roman numeral for 5 being the letter V. Get it? And informally, leeches.
I just think if the leeches got hold of her, sucked her empty.
Angie reckons leeches knew about the Gulf War syndrome way before we did. Sex is something the leeches use to get what they want. It's not how they make other leeches.
As for why this choice was made, maybe because this show was very much aimed at an adult audience, with a 10 PM airtime on Tuesday nights, and an advertising campaign that highlighted the show's serious and often gloomy tone.
It makes you very susceptible to suggestion.
We can make you believe. Only they can do that.
And dancing around the V word was a way to ward off the campiness of the concept. But for me it also works to distance the show from the traditional tropes of vampires. The function of their presence in fiction, with their status as representations of capital and elites being so well established, that Karl Marx was constantly using vampirism as a metaphor for the rich and for capital, long before Bram Stoker arrived with Dracula, establishing much of the modern lore and mythology that we still see in vampire fiction to this day, and also making it, well, kinda racist. A metaphor for foreign money infiltrating British society that old money toffs had to stamp out.
Oh my God!
Beyond the second episode, In Nomine Patris, which has as its antagonist an old money aristo potentially using vampiric powers to exploit the markets.
She's a banker, he's a leech, they're probably related.
Ultraviolet has very little interest in vampirism as a critique of capitalism, save for the odder side.
Big money. Leeches like money.
Something partially addressed by the show itself, in that rich and powerful people tend to have some measure of renown, making them impractical candidates for vampirism.
So why don't they recruit him?
He's a public figure. You've seen what happens when they go out in the daylight.
Ultraviolet prefers instead to use this platform to offer more modern social commentary, with varying degrees of effectiveness. The third episode, Sub Judice, uses a vampiric pregnancy to explore the question of a woman's right to choose. The fourth, Mea Culpa, abuse of minors. And the fifth, Terra Incognita, dabbles with questions of human trafficking. The show also tries to bring the mythology of vampires into the modern day. And some of the ways it does this are actually very clever, taking the classic trope of vampires casting no reflection, and extending it to them not being visible on video or audible over a telephone, while some are, well, kinda stupid, such as an inability to record their fingerprints.
What's the deal with fingerprinting?
Ink is like any other medium, it doesn't record.
But this isn't cinema sins. And while that did cause me to squint and ponder the logistics, it was a stretching of the concept that was necessary for the plot. I think that's perfectly fine, and so we move on. Perhaps the series' greatest strength was its cast, a mixture of future stars and stalwart television character actors. giving even the silliest moments a veneer of gravitas. As the series lead Michael, we have Jack Davenport, fresh off his breakout role working with Ultraviolet writer-director Joe Ahern in the achingly 90s BBC Two flatshare drama This Life, and soon to go on to have a choice role in 1999's The Talented Mr. Ripley, a goofy supporting part in 2003's The Pirates of the Caribbean and its sequels, and as the lead Steve in Stephen Moffat's completely original sitcom Coupling.
Have you finished with Jane? Are you out of the zone?
Michael is the audience surrogate character here, a newcomer to this world who needs major plot points explained to him, as well as the moral barometer for the show. He essentially functions as a skeptic, questioning the necessity of the actions of his more hardened colleagues, and whether this righteous crusade is really as justified as they think.
It's called a vocation.
Yeah, vendetta more like.
Hamming it up delightfully as the apparent head of this mysterious organisation is Philip Quast, who did not get the memo about this being serious TV, and absolutely thinks he's in an episode of Doctor Who circa 1974.
You're right, of course. They don't mean us any harm. They want to save us.
It doesn't sound so bad.
And the only way they can save us is by controlling us. If people like you don't take a stand now, do you know where your loved ones are going to be in 50 years' time? Battery farms. Believe me, our free-range days are over.
Susannah Harker, a stalwart of British television since her breakout roles in the original House of Cards in 1991, and alongside Clive Owen in the charming TV show Chancer, which made more stars for British TV than The Big Bang, was a serendipitous bit of casting, being the great-great-granddaughter of Joseph Harker, a friend of Bram Stoker and the inspiration for the ill-fated Jonathan Harker in Stoker's Dracula. She plays Angie Marsh, the team's resident doctor and expert on all kinds of sciencey gobbledygook whenever the plot requires it.
His inability to metabolize UV made him the ideal guinea pig. Our closest relative to Janus Code 5.
And as the team's military grunt, Vaughn Rice, we have Idris Elba, a promising young actor in one of his first big roles that wasn't Pizza Delivery Man, who inexplicably vanished from our screens for 25 years before making his triumphant return in 2023's World Gold Council documentary, Gold, A Journey with Idris Elba.
I'm talking about gold.
In all seriousness, Idris is phenomenal in this show. He may have gone into it as a jobbing actor, taking supporting roles in middle-of-the-road British TV shows. But by the end of the episode that most heavily features his character, Terra Incognita, he is unquestionably a star. One scene in particular where Vaughn finds himself trapped in a warehouse surrounded by high-tech coffins with countdown timers, due to open at sunset, is maybe the single best scene in the whole show, and perhaps a window into what could have been if a second season with a bigger budget had been possible. You feel that Ahern and the other creators behind the camera realise what they had here too, as Vaughn may start the show brooding and gruff, a man of few terse words there to rough up suspects and dole out old-fashioned reactionary takes, like your least favourite in-law over Christmas dinner, as Michael looks on disapprovingly.
You'll have paranoia, you'll have vigilantes, you'll have people running back to religion in droves. The next thing you know, you'll have the Archbishop up for Prime Minister. I don't fancy living in Iran, do you? But by the end of the series, he is being given all of the best lines.
But crosses, holy water, yes?
Never touched the stuff. No, it was on dirty protest. Next time you open a van.
You don't need me to tell you that Idris Elba is a bit good at his job at this point. His career after this is solid gold proof.
That is a lot of gold.
But it's incredible how fully formed and assured he is as a performer in what was his first major role. The supporting cast too are largely excellent, with perhaps one or two exceptions.
Do I have to account for all my movements now? I'm sorry, I won't.
Colette Brown and Fiona Dolman are both excellent, with Dolman in particular seeming to be being positioned for a larger role if the series had continued. And there is an early role for Kill List Neil Maskell, always a welcome presence on my screen, while veteran of stage and screen Corinne Redgrave and the soon-to-be a vampire for a much longer run Stephen Moyer both rode the line between cartoon villainy and making us question whether the vampires in this story are in fact truly the bad guys. And the moral ambiguity that runs through the show is one of the aspects that most makes it rewatchable 25 years later.
They're a death squad, Mike!
Ultraviolet isn't afraid of toying with the idea that this organisation, itself remaining nameless but seemingly with connections to the church and with government funding, are zealots, demonising and exterminating an oppressed group as the powerful have done throughout history.
Did they tell you I was evil? It's what the church always says, Mike. Women, black, disabled, gay. Now us. Do you like living in the Middle Ages?
It is again something you wish there could have been more seasons to explore further, as it is almost certain that this ambiguity would have deepened, and certain examples certainly feel timely today.
No, organisations like yours never want to resolve conflicts, they just want them to carry on. And they do that by demonising the other side.
Without giving too much away, this looms over the series, not just in the question of which side are on the offensive and which are on the defensive in this war, but in the undercurrent that even if the vampires in this story are acting out of self-interest, is that just a reflection of the destructive nature of mankind, the threat of humanity wiping itself out through global warming or a nuclear winter?
They're obsessed with viruses, diseases, anything that messes up their food supply.
Ultraviolet was far from a perfect show, fumbling some of its social commentary, particularly in the episode Mea Culpa, and the dark humour of the climax of Subjudice, a pro-life activist causing a vampiric miscarriage with the crucifix round her neck, something that felt kind of out of place and cheap. And speaking of cheap, some of the sets would have looked right at home wobbling back and forth on Matt Holness and Richard Ayoade's cult spoof, Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
I think I'm gonna die. No, you're not.
Ultraviolet also existed in a time before television had really embraced being cinematic in look and scope. A world before 50-inch plasma screens and Ultra HD. And it has the flat look of TV crafted to be watched in a tiny CRT in the corner of the room. Even in that paradigm, it was far from the prestige TV of the time, a low-budget late-night offering from the smallest and least watched terrestrial channel in the UK. So I'm more than prepared to cut it some slack, an overachieving featherweight that may not knock you out, but is very much punching above its weight. Although the season is effectively wrapped up with a fairly nice bow, there is so much here that could have led to very interesting later seasons, and although that was definitely teased, it failed to materialise. An American remake with Idris reprising his role because, of course, made it to pilot but vanished, which is probably for the best, as, well, can you imagine a world without Stringer Bell? I can, and it's horrific.
You acting like we got an inelastic product and we don't.
Ultimately, we are left with just these 6 episodes of Ultraviolet, an intriguing little curio that put the foundations in place for a really interesting and challenging show as it found its feet, that sadly never came to be. If any of that sounds interesting to you, in the UK it is available to stream on Channel 4 streaming service, and I think it's on Amazon Prime outside of the UK, although don't quote me on that. Thank you very much for watching. I promised a shorter video this time, and hopefully more of you will have made it to the end, as that would be cool. If you enjoyed this, maybe check out some of my other videos, maybe you'll like those too. And please feel free to comment below, even if it's only to say mean things. I do read all of the comments, and I'll try to get back to you as and when I can. Don't forget that you can like and share this video, those things do help, and subscribe if you want to see more of this sort of content. I'm going to be trying a couple of different things in the upcoming videos, and also more of the same gubbins I've already done, so that's exciting. I don't know why you wouldn't instantly sub hearing a pitch like that. And also a big thank you to those who have subbed, those who do hit like, and those who have commented, even if it is just to say mean things. You guys are honestly really great. I just love making these little videos, it's fun to do, and if people like them too, that's really awesome. Hopefully I'll see you next time.